The afternoon light inside the Soul Blossom Media Hall had a softness that felt almost deliberate, as though the sun itself understood the importance of the moment. The wide glass windows of the studio lounge. Gentle rays poured across the polished floors, illuminating the delicate cherry blossom mural behind the interview chair. Outside, Yeouido Park was beginning to shift into evening, the leaves trembling in the late autumn breeze. Inside, however, everything was still. Mei Mei walked into the studio with the poise of someone who had learned how to breathe again after stepping into a new chapter of life. Her ivory dress moved like quiet water with each step, and when she sat down, she offered the journalist a smile, soft, thoughtful, with a kind of maturity that comes from love lived, not imagined. It was her first post-marriage interview, and the world had been waiting. For months, fans and media outlets across Asia had speculated about how married life had changed her. Was Long the romantic lead he seemed to be? Was their life as sweet as their photographs suggested? Did reality match the fairy tale that the wedding headlines had painted? Mei Mei knew all those questions long before the interview began. Yet she chose not to start with the glamour or perfection. Instead, she opened with a simple sentence that immediately drew the room into a hush. "Marriage teaches you things even love cannot," she said, her voice steady but warm. The journalist leaned forward slightly, sensing a deeper truth beneath her calm exterior. Mei Mei's aura was different from before, a gentle confidence mixed with a quiet tenderness that felt lived in, as though it had been shaped by mornings, evenings, moments, laughter, and the silent spaces in between. When asked what she meant by her opening statement, she let out a small laugh, almost shy, before replying. "Think you know a person before you marry them. But sometimes, the sweetest surprises come after the ceremony." You began to unfold like the pages of a diary she had kept close to her heart. She explained that while she and Long had been public figures long before their wedding, there were sides of him she never truly understood until they began living together. Not dramatic revelations, not shocking confessions, but small truths, subtle habits, hidden tenderness, and of details no one sees unless they stand beside someone every day. She spoke first about something she called his protective instinct, a phrase that brought a spark of amusement to her eyes. "Didn't know he worried so much," she admitted, lifting a hand to adjust a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's not the kind of worry that smothers you. It's the kind that makes you feel safe even on days you're not paying attention." The journalist asked her to elaborate, and Mei Mei's smile grew deeper, almost bashful. "Long has this habit," she began, "of reminding me to bring a jacket everywhere, even when he's the one who forgets his own." She laughed softly. "We'd leave the house, and before I stepped out the door, he'd ask, 'Is it in your bag?' as if I were a child who might catch a cold at the slightest breeze." She paused for a moment, expression softening in a way that told more than her words ever could. "I used to think it was unnecessary," she continued. "But after a while, I realized it was his way of saying I care about you without actually saying it." The conversation eased naturally into another revelation, one that seemed to surprise even the journalist. "I didn't know he checked my schedule," Mei Mei said. "Every single morning." Her tone wasn't frustrated or embarrassed. If anything, it was touched, like someone who still wasn't used to being cared for so thoughtfully. She described how Long would quietly open his phone after waking up, scroll through her agenda shared with her manager, mark the parts of the day that might exhaust her. He'd message my manager asking, "Will she be out late tonight, or can you make sure she eats something before filming?" I didn't even realize he was doing it until one day my manager accidentally told me. I was speechless. A faint blush rose along her cheeks as she added, "He's more attentive than I ever imagined. More than he shows." Journalist, intrigued, asked whether these gestures ever felt overwhelming. Mei Mei shook her head immediately. "No," she said. "Because it's not controlling. It's comforting. It's like having someone who wants to know how your day is going. Not because they need to, but because they want to care." She leaned back slightly, light from the window outlining her silhouette. "Sometimes I'd return home late from a shoot, and I'd see him waiting in the car outside the studio. He wouldn't tell me he was there. He'd just sit, reading a book or typing something on his laptop. When I walked out, he'd look up, smile, and say, 'Let's go home.' It was simple, quiet, incredibly meaningful." For a moment, the room felt suspended in time. Every detail of her story was painted in the warm gold of evening sunlight. Then came the reveal that caused the entire mood of the interview to shift, gentle, yet powerful enough to go viral the very moment it would be published. Didn't know he could cook. Mei Mei confessed with a grin. Or rather, I didn't know he would wake up at 5 in the morning just to make breakfast for me whenever I had an early shoot. She described walking into their kitchen one dawn. By the sound of chopping. Only to find Yu Long standing in front of the stove wearing mismatched pajamas, hair tousled, an apron slightly crooked. Steam curled from the pot of porridge, a pan sizzled with eggs. He looked up at her, startled. If he'd been caught doing something forbidden. He said, I checked your schedule. Have a long day. You need to eat before you go. I didn't know what to say. Her eyes glistened, not with tears. A softness that spoke volumes. He doesn't say I love you 100 times a day. But he wakes up before sunrise to make sure I start my day well. That's his love language. The journalist noted the tenderness in her voice. The quiet pride that infused each word. It wasn't a boast. It wasn't exaggeration. It was love. Spoken in the simplest truths. They continued, her tone turning thoughtful. Being together revealed so much about him. He's not perfect. He has days when he's stubborn. I have days when I'm impatient. We bicker about silly things, like how I'll leave cups everywhere or how he folds laundry too precisely. She laughed softly again, shaking her head. But marriage isn't about perfection, she said. Choosing each other. Even on days when we aren't easy to love. First part of the interview approached its end. Shared one final reflection that captured the essence of everything she had said. Before we got married, she said. I already knew him. But after the wedding, I learned the little things he hides, not because they're flaws. Because they're the gentle ways he loves. The journalist looked at her, absorbing the weight and beauty of that statement. Through the glass walls of the studio, the sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the floor as if to frame the closing words of the hour. Outside, the wind had quieted. Inside, truth had only just begun to unfold. The second half of the interview began just as the daylight outside dipped into that soft blue hour when Seoul feels like it is holding its breath. Yeouido Park, once painted in warm afternoon gold, washed in twilight. In the studio lounge, the lights were dimmed ever so slightly, casting a warm glow that made the space feel intimate, an atmosphere that invited truth rather than performance. Mei Mei shifted gently in her seat, a loose strand of hair behind her ear. There was a newfound warmth in the room. Sense that the earlier stories had opened a doorway to even deeper confessions, not dramatic ones, not designed to shock, but honest moments that revealed the tenderness of married life in ways far more profound than scandal ever could. People always think marriage is about big gestures, she said softly. But it's really the small ones that stay with you. Journalist smiled. Is there something more you'd like to share? Mei Mei exhaled a quiet laugh. The kind that suggested she was about to confess something unexpectedly sweet. There were things I learned only after living with him, things even I didn't see during our years of dating. She paused. Like how sensitive he actually is. The surprise was visible on the journalist's face. In public, Yu Long was known for his calm stoicism, the kind of man whose sharp features and steady posture suggested unshakable composure. But Mei Mei's voice softened with affection as she revealed. Feels things deeply. More deeply than he lets on. She recalled a moment shortly after the wedding, one she had never spoken of before. There was a night when I came home exhausted from filming. Didn't say anything because I didn't want to worry him. He walked into the living room, looked at me, and said, "You're tired, aren't you?" I denied it, of course. She added with a shy smile. Just wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and stayed beside me without saying anything. She paused, eyes turning reflective. You even when I pretended. And it frightened me in a beautiful way, because it meant he saw me. The interview continued with another revelation. This time spoken with a touch of amusement in her eyes. I once found him practicing how to make my favorite dishes, she said. At first I thought he was hiding something because he kept locking the kitchen door. Her laughter carried through the room, warm and sincere. Then one day I walked in early and found him watching cooking tutorials on his phone while his face was covered in flour. According to Mei Mei, Yu Long can't handle spicy food at all, yet he insisted on learning how to cook spicy Tizuan dishes because they reminded her of her hometown. He would cough, turn red, drink water between bites while testing the recipe, she recalled, shaking her head fondly. But he still kept doing it. And if I loved the food, he had to learn how to make it. The journalist leaned back in their chair, clearly taken by the tenderness woven into every story. He sounds romantic, they said. Mei's expression softened into something deeper, something fragile but powerful. He's not romantic in the usual dramatic way, she said. He won't write poetry or surprise me with roses every day. But he notices things. And he acts on them. She described how one evening, when she came home feeling particularly stressed, he handed her a cup of warm tea without a word. I didn't realize until later that he had called my manager earlier that day to check if I'd been overwhelmed. He knew before I even walked through the door. It was another confession she had kept quiet until now, one that would melt the hearts of anyone listening. He keeps a folder on his laptop, she revealed. Cheeks turning faintly pink. It's full of our photos. Not the ones we post. The private ones. Ones he takes when he thinks I'm not looking. She paused, remembering the moment she discovered it by accident. It was filled with silly little things, me sleeping on the couch, me laughing in the kitchen, me looking out the window at night. He named the folder Home. The journalist processed the emotional weight of that detail. Mei Mei continued, her voice barely above a whisper. To him, it isn't a place. It's a person. It's us. A gentle silence filled the room before the journalist asked carefully, does he ever get jealous? The question carried no malice, only curiosity. And Mei Mei's immediate blush gave the answer away before her words did. Times, she said with a quiet laugh. But it's cute. She described how Yu Long would pretend not to care when she watched an old drama of hers featuring a romantic scene, yet minutes later, he would say, did you really need to hug him that tightly, with an expression somewhere between mock seriousness and childish sulking. Mei Mei could only shake her head affectionately. It's silly. But it shows he cares. And honestly, I find it endearing. But the interview took a more emotional turn when she revealed something deeper, a truth that explained everything. You know why he protects me so much? She said softly. It's not because he doesn't trust me. Because he grew up watching his own mother handle everything alone. The journalist's expression softened with understanding. He once told me, Mei Mei continued, I don't want my wife to carry burdens by herself, and he meant it. All those gestures, checking my schedule, waking up early to cook, waiting outside the studio, they weren't habits. They were the way he promised himself he would treat the person he loved. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. There was pride in her voice when she said, he's not perfect. He works hard to love in the ways he knows. And that sincerity, that's what makes me feel safe. The final moments of the interview felt like the soft closing of a storybook. The sun had completely set. Lights of Seoul began to sparkle outside the window, reflecting like scattered stars on the water below. Mei seemed calmer now, as though sharing her truths had lifted something unseen from her shoulders. Marriage didn't show me his flaws, she said quietly. It showed me his sincerity. She looked toward the window. The city lights flicker. Love isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's the quiet moments, when he hands me a cup of tea, or puts an extra jacket in the car, or waits outside a building without telling me. Voice softened even further. Love is silent protection. And after the wedding, I realized how deeply he loves in silence. When the interview ended, the journalist lingered a moment longer, watching as she gathered her things with a gentle grace she had carried throughout the day. On the table beside her empty cup lay a pink sticky note she had brought from home, one written by Yu Long earlier that morning. In simple, imperfect handwriting. Care today. I'll be waiting for you at home. The journalist knew instantly. That single note was the real story. The quiet truth beneath everything Mei Mei had revealed. A marriage not built on perfection, but on everyday tenderness. The kind the world rarely sees. She finally chose to share.